We'll kick things off, obviously, with that 3-1 victory for the Dutch. It was a great opportunity for the US to start well. Christian Pulisic had a big chance that was saved. And from then on, really, the Dutch took control. We saw Depay scoring after 11 minutes. And then just before the break, Daley Blind would make it 2-1, giving the Dutch the initiative. The US would get one back, but then Dumfries would score pretty much soon after. They made it 2-1, 3-1. That was it. A game over. For a lot more on this, let's welcome in, shall we, from Qatar, Seb and Herker with us, as is Nadem. Casey joins us as well. Mario, to give us a Dutch perspective, who's going to be a little bit patient, Mario, because we're going to have to start with the US and where it went wrong for Greg Berhalter first. Let's start in Qatar, shall we, for everyone and their ways. Boys, how are you feeling now? 12 hours after the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first 10 minutes of the game went great, Herc, and then clearly the Dutch quality kind of shone through.
Yeah, a lot of quality, a lot of individual quality, collective. The coaching came through as well. First 10 minutes, you almost started asking yourself, why is there so much U.S. possession? Like, what is going on here? And then you realized the Christian Pulisic chance, it was probably the most clear chance besides that goal, that they had it under control. And I mean they as the Dutch. The Dutch knew exactly what they were doing. They were sitting back. They were being calculated. They were being intelligent. They were letting the U.S. have possession of the ball, trying to create a numerical advantage on the wings. And once that ball possession was lost, their shape was just out of whack. They weren't in a disciplined shape, and it was right back down the heart of that spine. It was 1, 2, 3 touches, and the opposite end, and just schoolboy errors. The second goal comes off a throw-in, literally a throw-in a few minutes before halftime. You could literally see the collective soul of the U.S. men's national team leave their body, and then it was just cruise control for the Dutch national team after that.
Yeah, you kind of got the sense, watching this game, we hear Casey there in the background. You kind of got the sense, right, that the U.S. had fallen in love with their physicality. When we were talking about this game in the lead up to it, we thought so much about this American midfield. And yet almost that physicality worked against them. Like the technique that the Dutch had, especially in the first goal. Yeah. You see the quality there. And the U.S. guys, for as good as they played, they never got on the ball, and when they did, they just really couldn't beat all that dangerous.
Yeah, I think the possession statistic will make you think that the USA were controlling the game, but ultimately it was the Netherlands that were doing so. Yeah. They were allowing...
It's almost 60-40 to US.
Literally, yeah. So you would think that's like a nice positive performance, but it wasn't the case. I think there was a lot of time when Zimmerman had it and Tim Ream had it, and they weren't really doing anything with it. And when you are in that position, you sort of get lulled into this false sense of security that everything's under control. And I think at times you've seen Serginho Dest, you've seen Robinson go too far forward, and lo and behold, for the Netherlands, when there was a turnover, they're coming straight at you. I think that was the case for the first goal. And then the second goal, as Herc said, it's such a sloppy way to concede directly from a throw-in. Well, this is your chance to sort of organise and to put things into a good spot. Yet still now you concede in the last minute of the first half. You could have gone at 1-0 at half-time and thought, this is what we're going to do in the second half, but now the mountain's just that little bit higher. The task is just that little bit tougher. And in fairness to Van Gaal, when you're bringing on, was it Bergwijn?
It was.
And he's dropping people back. He's going more attacking at 2-0 up in a knockout round of a World Cup. It's impressive. And just to mention one thing, actually. So I was speaking with Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank, and...
Oh, name drop.
Wow. Name drop for sure. This is one of many name drops I could put in there. And he said the biggest thing that he was disappointed with from the US was the fact that he felt the manager treated it like it was a group game. He said at the end of the day, you could have gone through on penalties. So why be so open in a game of that magnitude?
That's the most frustrating thing is you saw how calculated they were, how intelligent they were against England. Yep. In my eyes, a much more difficult opponent, and they respected the English national team. They said, you know what, we need to be very careful, very disciplined in the way we attack to not leave ourselves open.
Don't Americans like their teams aggressive? They were too aggressive?
They were too naive. It was very naive of them to think that they could go and attack them that way and commit those type of numbers, and that the Netherlands team wouldn't be able to hurt them in transition.
Yeah, we got to acknowledge that the better players are on the Dutch side too, right? Greg Berhalter said as much afterwards. But the U.S. had more shots on goal, and yet the quality of the chances, the clinical nature of these Dutch players. And I'm not just talking about the finishes.
More shots on. Do you see the type of saves Turner had to make? I don't ever recall.
Noppert didn't have to make a big save on Pulisic?
it was the only one, Seb. You keep mentioning Christian Pulisic's chance. It was the only one in the 9th minute, and then they had nothing else besides the goal, which is a very fortunate goal if you're looking at it. I still don't know how that ball went in.
Yeah. I guess my point is not just the finishing. It's every cross from the Dutch was dangerous. Every ball into the final third was dangerous. And Christian Pulisic's one of the guys, but he's the guy we focus on a lot. When he got into those dangerous spots, the final pass wasn't there. And there really were not any Americans that completed the final pass.
Yeah, so I think for people who would have been watching the game from home, it probably sounded quite quiet in the stadium. And I think that was symptomatic of the way that the USA were playing. So they had the possession, but they weren't really doing anything with it. Every time there was something which could get the crowd going, they really got into it. And you could sense how many thousands of USA fans were there. But for large parts, they were quiet. The ball's moving side to side. They were a little bit sloppy in possession. And then the only time you'd kind of hear them was with this feeling of dread as all of a sudden Depay's got the ball in the 10, he's turning, he's running straight at the back line. So I think, it's a tough game for them. But ultimately, this is the lesson. There are some teams who have better players, have the better experience. And overall, I think the Netherlands looked comfortable, even though they didn't. They weren't the ones that they were sort of the protagonists within the game.
That experience is with players and managers as well. Louis van Gaal after the game saying, this team didn't adjust. He was very blunt. He was very direct, kind of putting it on Greg Berhalter at the end of the day.
Naive, Casey, is that a word you would use to describe the performance today?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that. I mean, I would agree with what Jimmy Floyd said, is the United States played a particular way in the group phase. And we talked about how resolute they defended, how Matt Turner really didn't have really difficult saves to make. Yes, there's that one moment, that Harry Kane free header in stoppage time. But for the most part, it was a team that picked and chose their opportunities to get forward. They scored when they needed to score, but they made sure they kept it tight defensively. And then for some reason in this match, they just went for it. From the very first minute, they just started throwing numbers forward. And yes, I think it caught the Dutch off a little bit. And they created that good chance from Pulisic early. But after that, it was a case where this is not a Dutch side that's going to pick you apart for 90 minutes of a game. But go back to their first goal. U.S. has numbers forward, and it was a 7-8 pass, one-touch combination, 1-2 touch, that once you break a press like that, you've got 6-7 guys behind the ball, and the quality and the efficiency of the Dutch attack, hurt the U.S. And go back to key moments. The goal in the last kick of the first half on a simple mistake, a silly giveaway. And the slowest player in the World Cup sneaks in front of you and smashes a ball home for a 2-0 lead before halftime. And at that stage, it's almost insurmountable. But give the guys credit. They kept fighting in the second half. They got themselves back into the game. And right when you're starting to put this Dutch side under pressure at 2-1, you fall asleep at the far post. And all that pressure goes to naught. So yeah, naive is a really, really key word, and one that Seb, we were talking about it on Football Americas. You asked me, was I satisfied with the tournament or was I disappointed with the way it ended? And I told you both. I'm happy with what I saw. I'm happy with a lot of young players who stepped up. I'm happy for someone like a Tim Ream who really wasn't even in the squad and had a tremendous tournament. But then I'm also disappointed because you're not going to have a better opportunity to beat a side like the Netherlands in the round of 16 than we had today.
What went wrong?
I think what happened is I think Mr. Van Gaal knew exactly what would have happened in that game. And he knew that the United States will open up and will go for it with the only enthusiasm and maybe the lack of experience in that level. And it's what they did. Unfortunately for the United States, they had the chance to score. And I think it would have been the turning point if Pulisic would have scored that goal. Because for me, and maybe Mario would tell us, I'm not sure the Netherlands have a plan B. The plan A, and maybe the only plan, is to wait and counterattack, which they do very, very well. And it happened straight after the miss of Pulisic, where when they scored the goal, when Depay scored the goal, we see Adams not coming back, making a mistake, not sprinting back to try to cover and take the ball from Depay. And he came like that, little mistake by little mistakes. At the end of the day, you lose the game. 3 crosses, the guy, he talked about it, 3 goals. And somehow lack of chances. But again, I go back to what I think. I think it's not only that they were naive, it's that they are somehow inexperienced still.
Right.
So within 4 years in the United States, being the host, maybe it would be different, but I think they have to improve in some details. Football is only about details. The Dutch, they resolved most of the details, where the United States didn't.
It's not only inexperienced players, it's an inexperienced coach. Where did he get it wrong?
I'm not so sure he got it that badly wrong, to be honest. You know, we can talk about how the dynamic of the game might have changed had Pulisic scored.
Right.
It would have meant that the US could have pretty much done what they're probably best at, and that is sitting, closing the ball, being tight the way they had been in a group, and then trying to break. Unfortunately, he didn't. And as soon as the Dutch scored, then after that, the Dutch were like, come on then. And I don't think Greg Berhalter can do anything about players who give the ball away. I don't think he picked a wrong team, but the players keep giving the ball away. And if you keep giving the ball away, then what's happening is the man who's giving it away, there's going to be players out of position because they're moving to get the ball. And then when you're playing against a side who are thriving on it, with somebody like Depay and the form that Gakpo's in, then you're up against it. And from there, for me, it was done at 1-0.
Again,
Really, Stevie?
The way the US were playing, the way they were giving the ball away, it was a matter of time for me when the second goal was coming because of that.
Why didn't they go into this game with the same approach as they did against England then? When it worked so well against England and they stifled them so well?
Because they knew that England will attack, will lead the game, and they knew that it was their will, which is not what the Netherlands wanted. And at the end of the day, it went perfect for the Netherlands. Again, had Pulisic would have scored the goal, it would have been completely different. Right. Because the United States would have dropped back. They would have waited for the Dutch. Van Gaal would have needed another plan, and then it would have been a different game. Oh, so it doesn't mean that Pulisic is the only guilty for that defeat, but it's a real turning point.
I want to bring Mario into the conversation. Mario, we'll talk about the Dutch obviously a little later on. Inevitably, I suppose it might lead this way anyway. But what did you make from the US over the 90 minutes?
I felt like I listened to all you guys. I think the US wasn't ready for what Holland was bringing to them. I think the energy that they played with the couple of games that they went by, they performed really well. They had a high energy. They played against England. And I think maybe in the English game, they maybe burst out too much energy compared to what was coming. Going back to also the other side is, I won't talk too much about Holland, but also I felt like America was surprised. They got the ball playing against a team that normally is dictating the game, and Holland didn't want that because they wanted to see how good is America when we give them the ball and let them dictate it. And let's see how good they're going to play now. And I don't think the US has ever had the experience doing that. And that's why the game turned around, because now they were using, because they knew, Van Gaal knew, if I'm going to play energy to energy, those are young players compared to what I have. I have young players too, but I still have a mixture. So, for example, Blind. Why did it took so long? They took way off. I don't think they should have taken him off because he is clearly the one that you want to test. But they never tested him. He never looked at the weak points for the Holland side. And I think that's what was the crucial thing. And that's why Holland really looked at all the weak spots. If I'm going to call out some weak points of you guys, it was incredible to watch the game. I was just watching the game and I was like, how do you not know? Because even when I was playing under Van Gaal, he would put us down as a team and highlight all the weak points of every team you play against. And he will tell you, this is what he's going to do. This is what's going to happen. And if you don't do it, you're going to lose the game. If you do it, we will win the game. That doesn't mean that he would have won the game because it was that easy. No. But I still think they should have done better in the sense of like understanding where's Holland weak and where are we weak so we don't get exposed.
How do you dictate the game when you don't have players that can do that, though? You know, we were talking the whole tournament about how great Adams and McKennie and Musa have been doing about this energy and closing the ball and winning the ball back. That's a different ball game than having the ball at your feet and having to outplay teams.
Then I suppose
they don't
why
have the
not
players.
start players like Aronson, like Gio Reyna, who can play with the ball?
So
Hey, Fina, why not bring in the
so you
personnel
really
that can do
think
that?
you really think Aronson? Do you really think any changes? Listen, the one player that they have that we would all say is a football player would be Reyna, but we have no idea what's been going on there. That's a complete mystery. But after him, are you really telling me that Aronson could have started this game and would have been involved in dictating play? He's not. He's a runner as well. So sometimes you've got to understand, you don't have the players to dictate a game. You have to hope that you can play the way that suits you. But if the opposition go ahead and then give you the ball, what are you supposed to do when you don't have the players to do it?
Herc, what do you think?
Well, I think Stevie's initially right in his thought, but there are different ways of dictating the game or making your mark on the game. If your motor is that midfield, then that midfield should be able to neutralize a Frankie de Jong, who didn't have a clear partner throughout this World Cup. I mean, it's Jerome in this game, but he had a partner every single game. So Van Gaal was still trying to get that right. What you don't want to do, and Mario highlighted, is Van Gaal's going to take your weaknesses. He clearly saw that Walker, Zimmerman, and perhaps Anthony Robinson weren't quite ready to have the ball at their feet, and eliminated the situations where it was Serginho Dest or maybe a Yunus Musa or a Christian Pulisic on the ball, and forced those to play make and forced them to come out of the back and forced those guys to commit numbers for going forward. So it would be only Tyler Adams hung out to dry when it was a counterattack. I think that's a way of dictating the game. You don't have to be a world beater on the ball to have a clear path of dictation in this game. And that's where I thought the U.S. men's national got in trouble. I agree 100% with Mario. They've been hearing all week, the Dutch national team, about, well, this isn't the Dutch national team of old. You know, no Bergkamp, no Van Basten. You don't have a Cruyff. You don't have a Van der Sar, not even in goal. I think Van Gaal said, okay, let's see how good you are. Show us how good you can be. And he just sat back. And I think in Greg Berhalter's mind, he saw what Ecuador was able to do in the group phase and said, we can use this as a blueprint. We can go at him with speed. We can be that team to dictate going forward and get chances, and that clearly was not the case.
If I may here, we have thrown a lot of praise at the MMA midfield, right? McKennie, Musa, Adams.
Yeah.
You were in the stadium. We don't always see on television what they're doing. What did you see from that trio there?
I just didn't see them working cohesively when they had the ball. I think there was a lot of times when the two centre-backs would have it and they'd be looking for an option and maybe they'd give it to Adams, but then it's not going to be in combination with Musa. It's not in combination with McKennie.
Do you feel like they wanted the ball?
I think at times it didn't really look like it, and I don't know why that was, essentially. I think some of them, perhaps in the moment, were hiding. Maybe the situation was difficult because they were looking around and they were having different looks to what they're used to. And so for some, they weren't really getting on the ball, getting on the half-turn, trying to be dynamic, because I thought for this game, and I kind of saw it from looking down, if they could move the ball quickly and inject tempo into it and be able to create some of those overloads, then great. But ultimately, it felt like at times they played the game at the Netherlands tempo instead of their own. And as a consequence, like, you're playing into their hands. And at that point, people overcommit. I think Serginho Dest, overall in the first half, attacked well. But then he sort of let some of those defensive duties go out the window, as we saw for that second goal. And I think there were other players who happened to be in that same situation, because lo and behold, whenever there was a break, you're seeing Depay and Gakpo versus Zimmerman and Tim Ream, and who do you think is going to win that matchup more often than not? So I didn't love it. I expected a bit more character from them, but they are still young players at the end of the day.
If I can just end real quickly with what Stevie said about what player can help you out, what one player is going to make that difference. That's the thing. When you don't have that one player, the system is imperative. The coaching system, the coach, what he does, it's imperative, because you need that system to beat players that are world beaters.
Worth noting here, too, everyone's talking about energy. And you talked about all the changes that Dutch have made in their midfield. So, in theory, we think those guys should be fresh. The U.S. hasn't really made those changes.
No.
And we talk about the gap in quality. It's just not the gap in quality and the technique of your starters. It's the depth of the roster. And we see that with this U.S. team.
Yeah.
This U.S. team is not as deep. And in the fourth game, that midfield engine, I think, I don't want to speak for anybody else on this panel, seemed to have not run out of gas, be very low in the gas tank, guys.
Let's take a talk about the tournament and overall, Casey. It was almost a bit like US elimination bingo, wasn't it, at the end? The pride, fight, showed American spirit, which you kind of have heard before, but there was supposed to be progress in this tournament. Did you see enough of it?
Well, yeah, I mean, you think of going from not qualifying to getting out of the group stage. You know, that's obviously progress with the second youngest team in the tournament. And so it wasn't like you had a bunch of guys with a lot of experience who slipped up in qualifying and put it right. It was a whole new group of guys and a new experience. And you think of the goals that Greg Berhalter had when he took the job. 1, qualify. 2, get out of the group stage. And he did both of those. Now, this idea that the U.S. is somehow going to flip a switch and become Brazil is kind of ridiculous. So I like what I saw at times, very much so. I mean, to the guy's point about the midfield three, you were more or less playing with 3 number 6s. And because you're playing with 3 number 6s, you really shielded that back 4 really well in the group stage. The idea was that Musa was going to be the one that would maybe be more advanced, get possession of the ball, run at defenses, maybe be more of the playmaker, but that never really materialized throughout this whole tournament. But what you did do is you kept it at 0 at the back. Yes, it was a rash challenge from Zimmerman. Was the only penalty in the group phase, which is what broke them down. So they did what they needed to do. They stayed in games, they fought hard, they got through, and then they threw that out the window. And that was a little bit frustrating. But overall, absolute success. Bright future, young players that, fingers crossed, can only get better. And then add in some new, younger players. And I really like where this United States national team is going.
You're going to have to find a number 9 at some stage, I reckon, before the next World Cup, Seb. Looking at it, are you as positive as Casey, Seb?
Yeah, and I would put it this way. I think the United States didn't just get good results in this tournament. They gave good performances. Let's put today aside for a second. I know it's the game we're all focused on, but for 45 minutes, they were the better team against Wales. There's a tactical change. They don't adjust well in that second half. Other than that, 5 of the 6 halves in the group phase, they're the better team, and I include the 2 halves against England. Nobody saw that coming. So, you can look at a team like Poland that's in the round of 16 and say, this team has played for nothing. I mean, they have results that'll get them into the round of 16, but on performance, how could you feel good about Poland? You look at this U.S. team, you say they performed well. Even in stretches today, they looked semi-dangerous, I'll say. Maybe they were lacking that final touch. And Dan, to your point, yes, it would be great to find a number 9. It's like a great quarterback in the NFL. They don't grow on trees. You don't just pop up with a number 9. And even the teams that are in this stage of the tournament don't all have great number 9. So, of course, if this U.S. team adds that, another level in 2026. And I think that's the backdrop, is that this is a young team that's heading into its prime for a home World Cup.
And you cannot forget how young they are. They're the second youngest team in this World Cup. They're the youngest team in what is this round of 16, right. What was left. And that inexperience is going to come back to bite you in the end. But what you saw, the growth, the potential is there. All these kids are going to be 25, 26, and 27 come next World Cup.
And do you think at that next World Cup they'll be able to sort of handle that pressure and the expectation from the home nation or not?
Yeah, you've got your nation behind you. You've got an experience you've got a World Cup experience under your belt. You've been there. You've seen it. Maybe there's more input on the coaches side. Even Greg Berhalter is going to come out better for this. This was a growing experience for Greg Berhalter himself. First 45 against Poland, very good. Second 45, extremely disappointed. So how can you come in thinking you can put a complete performance against England for a total 90? And he did. It's a growing experience for him as well.
What's your hunch right now? Will he be in charge in 4 years' time?
I don't think so. And I think Casey's mentioned it before. It's not something that it's because we don't want to or even the Federation doesn't want to. I think Greg Berhalter may be wearing thin on that one as well. Maybe he wants to try his hand at club level.
Yeah, and an important note here for whoever's going to be the coach, and if this team's going to grow and be able to handle that pressure, you got to get quality games in. And with no qualifying coming, that's going to be a problem. So that's a big thing for the Federation to figure out. How are we going to get competitive matches to test not just the players, but the manager, whoever that is, moving forward, guys?
When we played 98 before the World Cup, we were absolutely horrendous in every game we played before the World Cup. So I don't know if Seb is right, but it's not a very good example. But just want to say about the United States, I think after the non-qualification, the Federation and I think the MLS tried to improve the way of thinking and the gap that they have to how do you say, to fill comparing to other nations. United States is a big country. You have more than 30 million kids playing for soccer, where in France, for example, you have only 2 million. I guess it's something like that in England. You have all the players that you need to find the right team within like maybe 4 years, maybe 8 years, maybe 12 years. But if you don't go for the right thoughts and the right direction, you're going to be wrong everywhere.
It's definitely trending in the right direction, Stevie.
Absolutely, 100%. What you have now is a core. Listen, every club team, every successful club team has a core, and then you add to it. And it's hard to get in international football. But that's exactly what they've got. Through this qualification, through this World Cup, they've now got a goalkeeper that could be there for the next 10 years. You've got the three players in the middle of the park that we've been talking about. You've got Pulisic. You know, can you add 2 or 3 other players around that?
But to Casey's point, these players, this group, this core, is not going to make the US a top 10 team. You're not going to be sending Brazil overnight.
But that's where do you find your number 9 from? Do you find another? Can we get somebody like Pulisic on the other side? You know, can you get Dest, again, somebody like Dest can be around for another 7, 8 years. Can he take the next step? Robinson's going to be around as well. Can he take a next step as well? So, I mean, we've just spoken about 7 or 8 players who could be your core. Can you find a couple of superstars that will make a huge difference?
That's a big ask. That's the problem, isn't it?
But that's how everybody starts. Every team has to have the core, and then you add your stars. You've got to find your stars.
But your stars right now, the players you were naming, they're good, but if we compare with the top level in the world rank, they're still far away. So they have to improve. Of course, they are in a good way, in a good path, but they're still far away. You know, if you compare Robinson with the top of the top as a fullback, you will find like maybe 10 players. He can, get there, but he will have to work hard.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.